has tonight pledged more support for thousands of victims of IRA bombs made with explosives from Libya. His change of policy followed a day of intense criticism over the government's insistence that it would not have been appropriate to raise the issue of compensation with Colonel Gaddafi. But tonight, Gordon Brown said a Foreign Office team would now be dedicated to helping the victims try to secure some compensation. Here's our political correspondent, Ian Watson.
Ever since the convicted Lockerbie bomber Abdul Basit al-Megrahi was sent home by the Scottish Government more than a fortnight ago, Britain's relationship with Libya has rarely been off the radar. Initially, the Prime Minister didn't share his views on Megrahi's release with the rest of us, but last week he said there were no backroom deals.
There was no conspiracy, no cover-up, no double dealing, no deal on oil, no attempt to instruct Scottish ministers, no private assurances by me to Colonel Gaddafi. We were absolutely clear throughout with the Libyans and everyone else that this was a decision for the Scottish Government.
The opposition still say the Prime Minister hasn't given us the full picture. Today there were allegations that he didn't press Colonel Gaddafi to compensate victims of IRA violence who'd been injured by explosives supplied from Libya in the past, even though the US government did get cash for Americans who suffered in the same way.
If the British government is saying that the American government's action in settling with Libya on behalf of its citizens who were directly affected by Libya supplying Semtex to the IRA is a different issue to the British and Irish victims, and I can't for one understand that. I mean, morally it's the same issue.
The victims' families have been pressing the Prime Minister to have direct talks with the Libyan leader to get compensation. But in a letter to the victims' lawyer, Jason McHugh, dating from last autumn but released earlier today, the Prime Minister says the government does not consider it appropriate to enter into a bilateral discussion with Libya on this matter. But tonight all that changed. At a press conference with Germany's leader, initially to discuss the economy, the Prime Minister said the government would now offer far more support to the victims' families and that meetings with the Libyan authorities would be arranged to press for compensation on their behalf within weeks.
To say that we will continue to step up our support by establishing dedicated Foreign Office support to the Victims Campaign. We'll appoint dedicated officers in the Foreign Office, and our embassy in Tripoli will accompany the families and their representatives to meetings with the Libyan government to negotiate compensation.
This announcement was welcomed by victims' families tonight.
I think that Gordon Brown should support their families. I think that where nations have been guilty in supporting acts of terror, I think it's only but right that they pay up, that they compensate the families. And so, whilst it's late in coming, I welcome the support nonetheless.
But opposition politicians haven't been so positive. The Conservatives say the Prime Minister executed a U-turn as a result of media and public pressure, while the Liberal Democrats say the government should have acted sooner.
Gordon Brown may earn some credit for effectively admitting he got it wrong, but I think the British public will be surprised by his judgment and how he got himself into such a mess in the first place. And I think the public and the victims' families won't want to see an inquiry that's just confined to Lockerbie, but will want to see the whole UK-Libyan relationship scrutinised.
Gordon Brown got plaudits from the IRA victims' families tonight by saying he'd push Colonel Gaddafi harder for compensation, but opposition parties feel today's events have simply strengthened their calls for independent inquiries into the UK's whole relationship with Libya.
And Ian Watson's with me here in the studio. In a remarkable day, just take us through how these developments emerged during the course of the day.
Yes, it was extraordinary. Last night, the first editions of the Sunday Times suggested that Gordon Brown had blocked a deal with Libya in reaching compensation for the victims' families, those victims of a Libyan Semtex, if you like, carried out in IRA attacks. Now, Downing Street were not too pleased, to say the least, about this. They said this was completely inaccurate. Then they released to us correspondence which the Prime Minister had sent to the victims' families' lawyer. Now, in that correspondence, it was certainly the case that Gordon Brown wasn't blocking a deal with Libya. Nonetheless, he had said he wouldn't step up the pressure on Libya through bilateral negotiations. Now, suddenly, by the end of the day, he says, actually, we're going to have a whole team in place that's going to work with the victims' families, and they're going to go out to meet the Libyans, including the British embassy in Tripoli, and try and get that compensation for victims' families after all. And Jason McHugh, the person that the Prime Minister had written to, the lawyer initially saying no deal, he says tonight he's delighted with these developments and he thinks it's a victory for the victims.
So just briefly, now that we've had the change of policy, what happens now? The Prime Minister will want to put it behind him?
He will indeed, but there are some people in his own party who believe privately that the Prime Minister hasn't got on the front foot in this, or indeed on the whole question of our relations with Libya. They think there's a good case to argue about why Britain was engaging with Colonel Gaddafi's regime, but he seems to be reacting to events. The opposition parties have said the same, and they're continuing to renew calls for an inquiry into Britain's relationship with Libya right across the board and not just on this specific issue.
Ian Watson, thank you.